here, how about living things? What about living things? Well, I used to have a cherry tree in my backyard, and I loved to eat delicious cherries. However, there's a problem with my cherry tree. My cherry tree was, I think it was a male cherry tree. It wasn't the kind of cherry tree that produces cherries by itself. In order to produce cherries, I had to have another cherry tree. And that actually plants reproduce, not by themselves, but together with other plants. We can see they have parts called stamen. Have I got this right? Yeah, stamen and pistil. Masculine and feminine parts. I'm not sure I spelled that correctly. Stamen and pistil, masculine and feminine parts. In other words, plants become something greater than themselves. They go on to the next generation through the interaction, through the connection of positive and negative parts. And we can say animals. We all know animals come in male and female. Very few animals are both, although I think snails are. But even then, they need both parts. And ultimately, human beings, too. Come in male and female. So all throughout creation, we can see this very important characteristic, that all things in the creation are divided into two characteristics, masculine and feminine. And so this idea, which came up 3,000, 4,000 years ago in ancient China, actually pretty much proves to be true to this day. Things develop, progress, and continue because of one of these characteristics, because of masculine and feminine. Without this interaction between men and women, without this interaction between male and female, without particles coming together, because they have positive and negative characteristics, there would be no creation. There would be no future. If this didn't work, then this wouldn't work. And this didn't work, this didn't work, and so on down all the way. So in order to exist, we need to have these dual characteristics. So this is a very important part of our world. And we can say that perhaps then, if this is a very important characteristic of God's creation, it probably is also an aspect of God's character. It says in the Bible, I have created them in my own image, male and female, I have created them. Also, we often talk about, God the Father, and yet we also understand that there's God the Mother. In some parts of the Bible, for instance, God is very strong and powerful, but other parts of the Bible, God is very warm and loving. And, it says in Hosea, how I would gather you together as my children, and yet you don't stay with me. This is a really expression, and ultimately that part of the Bible, God ultimately forgives, just calls his people to him, that he can embrace them and love them. This is really, I think, an expression of God's motherly character. That God, so actually we could say this sort of view of ancient China can in a sense be one view of God as well. That God has masculine and feminine characteristics. That we actually have sort of a mother God and a father God. But actually, neither one. But instead God is one, single, unified being, which has the characteristics of both sides and can manifest them as God desires at the appropriate time. So that's one character. Another characteristic that we find, if we look around in creation, again, we look back at the same things. So look at particles. Particles, again, they have a form. Matter of fact, if we look at anything here, I hit it, makes noise. Why does it make noise? Because it's something we call matter. And ultimately, what is matter? Well, we get really far down. We'll talk about it in a minute. But basically, matter is made up of molecules, which are made up of atoms, which are made up of particles, which are made up of masculine and feminine, which have an external characteristic that we can touch. And so we can call this the external form of the particles. And yet particles don't just act at random. There's a law, a rule which guides the action of particles. We're going to call this the eternal directive nature. There's something inside a particle that drives it to be a particle and not a Volkswagen. for instance. Okay? But there's something in there that drives it. Particles, atoms too, have particles become atoms. They also have external form. They also have an internal nature. Molecules, same thing. They have external form. I mean, if you get some salt, hold it in your hand, you're looking at molecules. You're looking at a whole bunch of molecules of sodium and sodium chloride, which is again made up of these lower levels. So internal, external. And then let's look at plants. Now we're starting to get more sophisticated here. Plants obviously have an external form. You can see it right out there if you want. But also plants have an internal driving nature that's much more, in a sense, sophisticated than these elementary things. If you put sunlight, the plant will turn and face the sunlight. If you, they've had experiments where people play music or something, plants that hear, Bach or some beautiful music grow much better than plants that are forced to listen to Iron Maiden all day long. So plants also have external nature and also have internal character. And animals, if we think of animals, of course, have bodies. And also animals have instincts. It's getting much more sophisticated. Animal has a much more autonomy, much more room in which to act. And ultimately, human beings also have bodies. And we have minds. Okay? All through all these different levels, we can see that one aspect operates in external, in the physical realm, the realm we can touch, we can see, we can breathe. And there's another part of life that operates in an internal way. And we can. The thing is that we can see it and we can understand it. We can understand it even though we can't see it, because we also have this internal character. And, this is pretty straightforward, right? I don't want to spend too much time. I could go into lots of examples. It's kind of fun. For example, last time I taught this, I talked a lot about Damien's dog. It was a wonderful example of instinct. His dog is a, what kind of dog do you have, Damien?
Lab.
It's a lab. Really goofy.
His name's Cowboy.
Yeah, named Cowboy. Really.
Basically explains everything.
Really fun, very goofy, very interesting dog. And of course, our own situation too. Our mind truly affects our body. It's the mind that makes things happen. Our body doesn't operate autonomously. We understand that. There's a difference between a dead body and a live, walking, breathing human being, and that difference is this characteristic of mind. Okay. Actually, I missed one of my beautiful pictures here, so I'm going to just put it there. Okay. That's a flower reproducing. That's a bee. Okay. He's following his instinct to bring together the male parts and the female parts to produce more cactuses. Okay? So, now why do I go into all this? Okay. All right, this is all pretty obvious. Why do we go into this? Well, we want to understand how this universe works. We want to understand where we fit into it. So we can see that two very important characteristics. We can divide, in a sense, our universe into two very important, very different ways. Masculine and feminine, internal and external. So what does this tell us about God? We decided then that God also, if God's creation reflects God's nature, then God also must have these characteristics of internal, external, of masculine and feminine. And in fact, God does. And actually, we can divide God's character into God's internal and external character. And then we can also divide this into God's internal masculine character and internal feminine. And also, same thing, external masculine character and external feminine character.